So let's start now. Luann has been in love with mosaics for over 18 years.
Oh.
Co-founder of Skeew.biz, a mosaic supply company that specializes in mosaic backers. She is co-producer of Mosaic Technique's video, editor of icmosaics.com, and has taught, published hundreds of articles, and produced enough instructional videos to equal 5 or 6 full-length movies. Her latest ebook is the book on backers, and she'll talk about this later on and give you instructions on how you can get your free copy. So let me present Luann Weeks.
Well, thank you. I'm exhausted hearing all of that. Well, I'm so pleased to be here. I hope everyone can hear me all right. But thank you so much. I'm honored to be invited to speak, and I hope I can shed some light on substrates and adhesives and a lot more. But to start, I want to briefly talk about 6 different surfaces. And then we're going to show you a process that I hope will help you make the right decisions on your materials. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. There we go. You know, I often get asked about using wood outside as a mosaic surface. A lot of people like to make and mosaic wood tabletops, but I always advise against it. I just feel like you just can't seal wood well enough to use it outdoors. You know, it probably will last a little while, but you really don't want all of your hard work to fail. And there's 2 properties of wood that makes it problematic. There's a moisture transfer and a heat transfer. You know, wood soaks up water and it will expand, and then it dissipates water and shrinks. Heat also causes it to expand, and cold will cause it to contract. So with all of these cycles, you know, your adhesives, your tile, your grout, all of that is going to experience some amount of movement that's going to degrade the bond and ultimately lead to your tiles popping off. I enjoy using styrofoam. I don't know if any of you have used it before, but it's really fun. You can shape it. It's really lightweight. And what I like to do is use self-adhesive mesh over the styrofoam and then coat it in thin set before I mosaic it. This really helps to stabilize it, and it's a really great material to add to your mosaics if you want to add some, you know, some shape or get a 3D effect in your art. It's really messy to cut, but it's a lot of fun to work with. Now, terracotta pots are fun to mosaic, and they turn out really nice as long as you seal them inside and out with weld bond and water, and use thin set as your adhesive, and then use a penetrating grout sealer when you're all done. Your pot should really last quite a while. I wouldn't leave it out in the snow, though. I usually would recommend you bring it in during harsh winter months just to be safe. Now, these are my favorite substrates. What I mean by foam core boards is that they're engineered boards that are designed for construction materials. They're not those foam core that your kids use to display their science projects or that are used for framing art, but they are really lightweight, easy to hang, they're water resistant, and you can use just about any glue on the surface of them. And they're really great indoors or outdoors. You do, however, need to treat the edges either with mesh and thin set, or you can just tile the edges. You know, I like to use an exterior paint on the edges too. But stay away from petroleum-based products on those foam edges. I love these. These are so much fun out in the garden too. So you can walk outside and pick up rocks or stones or pebbles and use them to mosaic on or in a mosaic. You can get them for free, or at your hobby or garden centers. Thin set will work well on them, as other silicone adhesives do as well. Now with mesh, it's wonderful. I tend to change my mind frequently, so self-adhesive mesh lets me adjust and reposition my tiles really easily. And this was a project where we made all these elements on mesh with elementary age students. And you know, they didn't have to use glue, which was a lifesaver because they love glue, and not just a little, a lot. So all we needed to do was to provide them with some tiles and mesh. And then the art teacher and I used thin set and adhered all of these elements to the wall. So now I want to share with you guys a process that will keep you from making wrong decisions about your materials. And this process really will help you design and complete your mosaic inspiration without unnecessary complications and failures. I call this process DDM, Design, Display, and Materials. If you use this process, you're going to be able to pick the right backer, the right adhesives, the right materials, and display options. Always try to start with your design. Your design decisions will help refine your display decisions, and then they in turn help refine your material decisions. So I don't know if you guys are visual, but I'm very visual, so I decided I needed to create some kind of visual to help explain how your decisions flow from beginning to end. I want you to kind of think of it like a sifter, where you put lots of ideas in and then they filter or sift down while you're making certain decisions along the way. So let's run through 3 examples. This top tray is where your design ideas go. And some possibilities could be a design for a functional mosaic, or a 3-dimensional mosaic, or a 2-dimensional mosaic. So let's just say that for the functional mosaic, we'll make a mosaic trivet. And for the 3-dimensional, we're going to mosaic a fishing hat. And for the 2-dimensional, let's do a house address plaque. So now your 3 design decisions have refined your display decisions. So on your functional trivet, you're going to want to display it indoors, of course, in your kitchen or on your dining room table. On the 3D fishing hat, that's going to be displayed indoors on a shelf or on a display stand. And your 2D outdoor address plaque will be installed outside on the wall of your home. So now, as you can see, these display decisions have helped to refine your material decisions. But what exactly are your material decisions? This is where you need to know which backer goes with which adhesive and which tessera works with the design, the backer, the adhesives, and the display area or the environment it will be in. So let's talk about the trivet again. That's going to be in your kitchen, on your counter. So you want to choose a backer that's waterproof since spills can occur. So perhaps a foam core backer will work well here. And then your tessera, you might want to pick ceramics since you're going to be putting hot pots on it. And your glue might need, your glue's going to need to withstand moisture also. So perhaps you decide to use thin set for that. On the second example, your indoor fishing hat, your material decisions may be to buy a cotton hat that you're going to put several coats of thin set on. Then your tester is going to need to go around a circular hat and into small areas. So you're going to need small tiles or small pieces of stained glass to go around all of those little contours. And you can use weld bond or something similar to glue your tiles to the hat, since it's an indoor piece. And sanded grout's going to work well there. And then for the two-dimensional outdoor plaque on your home, you need to use an appropriate hanging system to accommodate the weight of your piece. So you might want to think about using a lightweight backer, which is also weatherproof since it's outside. So foam core might work well here as well. But there are other choices other than just foam core. But one note here is you need to really consider the size, because if it's really large, you may need to plan how to manipulate it in your studio. You might have to section it or even to transport it to install it. But again, for the plaque, you're going to want to match the right adhesive to the environment. So thin set is probably your best choice. Think about your tessera choices and how they fit with the environment and the backer and the adhesive. So a good tile for your address plaque could be vitreous tile, but there's lots more choices that would work well, as you know, like vitreous tile does. So I guess the point here is that before you get too excited and you jump in, like I do quite often, and start a project, try having a well-developed vision of a mosaic before you begin. And DDM, that's a good process that's going to help you do this, and it will help you make the critical decisions before you start. So now the final step is to look at what your choices have all shaken out to be. And then you're going to start your project. But what if you really don't know what all your substrate and adhesive choices are? Well, this is where the book on mosaic backers can help. This book is a compilation of some of the different mosaic backers that I've used throughout my many years as a mosaic artist. I've also researched lots of different adhesives and what they bond to, and those are also included in this book. And what you're going to find in here is a comprehensive list of 33 backers that I've categorized into 8 groups. I talk about their common uses, how to cut and shape them, what surface prep you might need, and what adhesives are going to work with it. And then there's information and details about weight and grouting that you might need to know. And also, at the end of the book, there's a table that has your backers listed and then what adhesives that you can use with these backers. So I'm very happy to have all of you get this book for free. Just email me. You can type in the book on backers in the subject line, and I'll be really happy to send it to you. And that really is it for my presentation. I'm happy to go and answer any questions. I appreciate y'all listening. Emily, have you got any questions that anybody wants me to answer?
First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. That means everyone else can too. Okay, so I have one question so far, which is someone's asked, Leslie Zales is asking, can we see what self-stick material you use on styrofoam? Can you talk a little bit about what that self-stick material is? Absolutely.
That's the self-adhesive mesh. And it is a fiberglass mesh that has an adhesive on one side of it. And I've worked a lot with it. You can cut it into pieces, and it's really wonderful for either, you lay it on top of your styrofoam and it just sticks right to it. So you can kind of cut it and trim it and cover, say you wanted to do a garden ball for outside, you would have your styrofoam ball, and you could just cut strips of this mesh and then just press it down onto the ball. and then just then take your thin set and mix your thin set just a little bit thinner than normal. And then you would just coat it real well with the thin set. When all that dries, you got a great surface that you can mosaic on. Does that help?
That's great. So I have another question for you. What is the best adhesive for glass on glass?
Ah, that's a good question. There's several. I don't know what the best is. I've heard MAC glue works great. I haven't personally tried it, but people love MAC glue.
Can you spell that? Is it MEC
Yes.
or MAC, M-A-C?
It's just MAC, MAC glue.
Mm-hmm.
You can also use Weld Bond, but Weld Bond takes forever to dry, so a lot of people don't really use it very much. There's other silicone glues that dry clear. There is a GE silicone glue. That's about all that I'm aware of for glass on glass.
Okay. So for right now, we don't have any other questions that have come in. I want to remind all of you that if you have a question or a thought you want to share, you can type it into the chat window. And since I'm unmuted, I can ask Luann on your behalf. So Kathleen shared that she uses silicone GE brand from Home Depot for glass on glass.
Good.
That one's also waterproof, which is nice, as opposed to something like Weld Bond.
Yes.
And another question here. What do you recommend for a backer for an address sign with sea glass?
I'm just in love with the foam core boards. I would use that because you can get the hanging kits with it too, and that makes it so easy to install. And then for your sea glass, thin set, you can use on these foam core boards will work great with sea glass, or E6000 works good. Any of those kinds of things will work great. But foam core, I think, for it being lightweight and being able to be outside, and the easy way that you can get the hanging kits to hang it, all work easy, and I like easy.
Mm-hmm. Great. So someone's asking, what is the brand of fiberglass mesh that you use or that you like?
Oh, well, I don't know if you guys know, but Skeew.biz is my business. We sell the fiberglass mesh with a sticky. We call it quick stick mosaic mesh. That's what I've used. I don't really know of any other brands available, to be honest with you.
Okay. So another question here, can you use Weld Bond on Wheatie board?
Yes, as long as you're working indoors, or if it's going to be hanging indoors, yes, you can.
Wonderful. And what type of thin set do you use for cold temperatures outside?
Well, I am probably not the person to ask that because I live in Florida and we do not get cold weather here. So my experience has really been in the warm weathers. But I would definitely want to stick with a brand like Latacrete or Mape or someone like that, a well-known brand. And then I would also look at to get one that has the polymers in it. And then also I would ask your local tile guy just what they use, because if anybody knows, they know, especially the cold weather. So
that's a good suggestion. And we do have two suggestions here from members. Kathleen Newsham is saying that she uses Carabond and Caralastic by Mape, so that combination works well in frost conditions. And then Cecilia is saying that she likes 254 Platinum from Latacrete.
Yeah, good companies, definitely. So I don't think you can go wrong there.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I since we're not seeing any more questions right this second, I want you all to think about particular projects that you have in mind or projects that you've already started. And if you've run into a challenge because of the backer, maybe this is a good chance to ask about it. And there's a question here from Nellie that says, what about acryl pro mastic? I'm not sure if the question is, would that work in cold conditions? Do you know anything about acryl pro mastic?
I do not. There's so many adhesives out there. That's one I'm not familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And Nellie, if you want to clarify the question a little bit, maybe we can get into more detail.
Yeah,
So Luann, I was wondering, maybe while we wait for some other questions, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, I know you have this in your backer book, but if you could talk a little bit about shaping and forming some of the different backers. I think we're probably all familiar with how to shape wood, just because we're more familiar with the tools, but for something like the styrofoam, I'd be curious to know what your favorite tools are. And also for things like even the foam core, do you have favorite tools for cutting, favorite tools for breaking?
Yeah, that's a great question. For styrofoam, if you can get yourself a hot knife, those are really great. Otherwise, you're using some kind of a, when I did that sculpture that I showed earlier, I used all kinds of things that I had in the kitchen. So I was just making a mess with all of these knives that have the serrated blades on them. So a hot knife will give you a nice clean cut. You just don't want to inhale those fumes because there are the heat, the fumes that come from that, but it works real well. And then as far as foam core boards, if you're wanting to cut those like a straight line, just a straight down and just to separate something, you can use a utility knife and a straight edge and score it until you go all the way through. It's very, very similar to Weedy board. And then if you want to cut shapes, then I suggest a jigsaw, and make sure you get a blade that has a lot of teeth. So it's a fine tooth blade, and a jigsaw just cuts really nice. You just draw your design right on it and cut it with your jigsaw.
Okay, thanks for that.
Sure.
So there's been a little bit of discussion on the chat box about the acryl pro mastic, and there's a bit of disagreement about whether or not it can be used for outdoor work where temperatures would get below 30 degrees. So I'd encourage everyone to do their own research on that. And if we can find any definitive answer, we'll certainly send it out.
Yeah, definitely. Check the specs. Usually you can go online and look at their specifications and research it that way.
Yeah. And there is a question here that says, can you make a mosaic on mesh and transfer it to a rock outside using thin set?
Absolutely. Just cut your mesh into a small little shape that you want it to be, and then put your tiles on it, and then you would just want to put your thin set in the area that the mesh is going to lay into. You want to lay that mesh into the thin set. The little trick about it is making sure you have enough thin set so that it gets a good grab, but not so much that it squishes up and totally covers where the grout needs to go. But it's very doable.
Great. Now I have a question following up on that. I've seen, somebody turned on their audio. I'm going to ask you to turn that off. So I wondered, I've noticed that some mesh is sold specifically as alkali resistant, which could be used with cements and thin sets, but some doesn't specify. Have you ever run into a mesh that's not alkali resistant?
No, I haven't. And the self-adhesive mesh that we have is alkali resistant. I think that's very important to make sure it is. I don't know if your regular mesh that has no adhesives, I've never had a problem with it.
Okay.
I don't know that it is made that way.
All right, that's good to hear.
You definitely want it to be alkali resistant though.
Okay, so one more question here. Someone is saying that they started a project using 1/4 inch Weedy board, but the project is too big now for the 1/4 inch. Would there be any issues adhering a piece of thicker Weedy board to the 1/4 inch to make it 3/4 of an inch thick in total? Should thin set be used for the adhesion?
My question back would be then what, is it going to be installed in a wall, or where is it going? Can we get that answer?
We may, but so what would your concern be if it's going to?
I'd be concerned that it would stay together unless you're putting it in a wall or installing it on a wall. Then you would at least have your screws going through it, and it would hold together.
Mm-hmm.
That would be my concern, that it would somehow the seam wouldn't work well.
Okay, so in addition to the thin set to stick it, you'd want something that would be more mechanical to actually hold the two pieces together.
Yep, exactly, yes.
Okay, and it sounds like it would be inside, and the plan was to have it framed ultimately.
Oh, okay, okay. You might even still be able to use screws in it and not, and they won't show if you mosaic over them as well. So put your T-nuts in and your screws in, and that could help hold them all together.
Mm-hmm.
That could work.
Great. All right, so we have about 5 more minutes left. So I want you all to rack your brains, think hard about how to use this opportunity. We have an expert on the line who can answer your questions and send them along. All right. Amy, do you have any questions while we wait for other folks? I should have prepared some myself, but I didn't think of that.
Yeah. No, I think I think it's a wrap.
Well, let's wait. We do have a couple more questions coming in. I did just ask for that, so that's good. Okay, so one question is, have you ever used French cleats on Ouija board?
On Ouija board? No, I haven't. I've used it on wood, but not Ouija board. But I think you would be fine with that because you're using the screws that go in through, how it holds. I think you'd be all right with that. I would just be careful if it would be possible to somehow to incorporate a weedy washer in there as well, so that the screws, when they go in, they have something more to grab with the weedy, so it doesn't tear through. That might help make it more substantial.
Great. Okay. And another question is, what would be the best materials to use for doing a mosaic on a concrete garden bench? I imagine that's an already fabricated concrete garden bench.
Right, right. They make great surfaces to mosaic on. Just make sure you've got them clean and ready to accept your thin set is what I would use. And that's pretty much about it for concrete. It's a great substrate to mosaic on, and just like bird baths and other things like that that are made out of cement and concrete. So,
and there's another question here about tiles, and I wonder if that person was also asking about what types of tile to use on a concrete bench. But this other question says, can you speak to the types of tiles that you use? I'm familiar with smelt glass, but not the other ones that you mentioned. Can you spell them out? Oh, smalty, sorry. I think they meant to type smalty. So they're familiar with smalty, but not the other types that you mentioned.
Oh, okay. So I mentioned vitreous, I think. And vitreous is just a glass tile. They are usually the 3/4 inch glass tiles. Very common. They're the ones that you might see on mesh in Home Depot. What else did I mention? Stained glass, I mentioned.
Does the book on backers have information about the different types of tile, or just backers?
It is all about the backers, how to use them, how to cut and shape them, how to prepare the surfaces, what adhesives work with it, and then other additional stuff about grouting. And so it's mainly about the backer. doesn't go into much about what tester to use.
So Leslie, you had asked that question. If you remember any of the other names and want to hear more about them, if you can help us remember what they were, maybe Luann can tell us more about them. And in the meantime, there's a question here about whether sealing wood with thin set could protect it against the elements.
No, not forever. No, some people want to take the risk. If you want to take the risk, you certainly can do it. But just know that it's eventually going to rot.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, it's just not going to last. Something will get through and it'll start to warp and then just start to decay. So,
right. Okay, I'm not seeing any clarification on the question about the tiles. So
okay.
it sounded, well, I wonder, Luann, do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you want to leave us with? Or should we close it out and have Amy tell us what the next steps are?
Well, I just want to thank you all for letting me come and speak. I wish I could see everyone and be with you, but I appreciate this opportunity. And please, I hope you'll let me send you this book on backers because it has a lot of good information. I think you'll find it helpful. And just appreciate your invitation, and I had a lot of fun.
Great, and you're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat box, so we really appreciate your time and you sharing all of this information with us.
Not a problem. If you have any further questions, want to email me, just feel free.
That's great.
Right.
Thanks.
So if you wanna request the book on backers, you can email Luann at lweeks WEEKS at Skeew SKEEW.biz, and we will be putting the recording up on the website. So if you'd like to review the webinar at your convenience, you'll be able to do that. Thanks so much for joining us this evening, and we hope to see you at the next webinar, which is March 26th at 8 p.m., featuring Carol Krensman, talking about how she made a 3D mosaic bed. So thank you very much. We'll end the webinar now.